Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending our event in partnership with our sister library in Düsseldorf, Germany. Today, Clare Westmacott will be joining us to discuss the soon-to-be published collection of her grandmother's diary, which provides a first-hand account of life in Germany during World War II. This discussion will be moderated by Professor Michelle Brockmeier, who will speak about the different ways women experience the war. If you have any questions, we will be monitoring the chat function online, and we'll ask some of those questions during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. For those attending in person, there are also index cards that you can write your questions down on and place in a basket, which will also be read. I will now allow our speakers to introduce themselves.
Okay. My turn? All right. Thank you for inviting me here this morning to talk about women in war in Europe. And so when we are talking about women in war, World War II was an anomaly. It was unlike any other war in history. Never before had so many countries fought. The home front provided no safety, as battlefields were in the cities, in farms, on the seas, in the air, and especially the air. Nowhere was safe in Europe. And so after 6 years of combat, there were almost 100 million casualties between Europe and Asia. Two-thirds of these casualties were civilians, meaning that women and children made up the majority of casualties before, other than soldiers, on the list of the dead. And so women had to face the harsh reality of life alone. The men were gone. Their husbands, their fathers, their sons, their brothers served in far off places, dying in far off lands, buried in unmarked mass graves in a foreign country. Millions of men were interred in POW camps, such as 2.5 million Frenchmen. Many were forced into labor camps. So the vast majority of women were left alone to face the economic and physical and emotional hardships on their own. So, for the first time in history, for many women, they were conscripted to determine and shape their own lives, but it was under the shadow of war. For women in Europe, some realities can't be denied. They had to face the war on their own. They carried the responsibility for their families and their children. Women who lived in countries that were occupied by the Germans, life was exceptionally cruel. Starvation rations, forced labor, fear, massive killings, and grief filled their lives. The further east you went, the more horrid the war was. Life in the East was hell for women. Women in Poland, Ukraine, Russia, the Balkans, survival was capricious and tenuous. These lands were part of Hitler's Lebensraum program, spelled out Mein Kampf in 1925. The massive territory of Eastern Europe was to be cleansed or depopulated, which to me means killed, of inferior races, the Slavs and the Jews, to make room for the master race. So millions of women and children died in the German occupation of these lands. And then when the Soviets come westward, millions more died as they were being liberated. So, and we have to think about the death tolls in the East. Over 30 million Russians died. Poland lost 20% of its non Jewish population, more than any other country in the war. The Germans not only exterminated Jews, they exterminated communists, the clergy, the intellectual power elite, the military, the undesirables. And then they put the people in the East on starvation diets of 200 calories a day, and many of them were forced into slave labor. And so for women in the East, their experience is much different than the women in the West. So in Western Europe, in the occupied countries of France, Belgium, Holland, Norway, life was harsh, but the German goal was not to liquidate the population, except for the Jews, communists, and undesirables. And by undesirables, we mean gays, criminals, and the physical and mentally handicapped. Also, these countries served as fodder for the German war machine to be stripped of all its wealth, natural and man made, and food supplies. So they really dealt with hunger and scarcity. Even though there was a 800 calorie a day ration, often women could not find enough food. And this was women's jobs to find the food. Women faced hunger and their children faced hunger as they struggled to live under several years of German occupation. One of the things we have to remember is this lasted for a very long time. They also had to live with the fear of the Gestapo and the SS, that at any time they could be picked up, arrested, tortured, and killed. Um, Most women who lived in these countries followed one of three paths: resistance, collaboration, or subjugation. Resistance, which is about 10% of the female population, which is often portrayed as glamorous and seductive and adventurous, was anything but. It was a very dangerous cat and mouse game. If you were caught, the price was torture, the price was death, and then you knew that your loved ones would also be rounded up to face torture and death. Um, Collaboration provided women with the luxuries and necessities they were missing, but also the comfort of men. Even though they were German men, they filled an emotional and physical need for these women. But these women paid a very high price for their salacious dalliances with the enemy after the war. They were publicly humiliated, shamed. They were often debased. Some of them were killed, and their legacy followed them for decades after the war. But for the vast majority of women, they just wanted to survive and provide for their families. And so, whether you lived in the occupied countries or the two countries I'm going to focus on now, Great Britain and Germany, you just wanted to survive. That was your focus. And so, these two nations, enemies at war, found themselves in a unique position. Britain is the last holdout to the German onslaught. And Germany is the relentless war machine marching across Europe. And so they each have a unique way of dealing with the war. But before I go into that, I want to talk about another factor that we need to put into here, and that is the pronatal policies that were installed in every country in Europe after World War One. These policies swept across Europe to try to raise a new generation of young men after the devastation of the Great War, where we lost a whole generation called the Lost Generation. And so, as one historian put it, he says, the government of all stripes chose to manipulate the breeding habits of their people in the name of the greater glory of the state. Now, women's reproduction became their patriotic duty. Remember, this is in the 1920s and 30s. And nowhere was this more true than in Germany. Whereas when Hitler came to power, women were seen as incubators of the German soldier. And so when Hitler came to power, with tremendous support from women, pronatal policies and the embracing of the Kirchen, sorry, my German's bad, children, kitchen, church ideology, German women were heralded for their sacrifice to the fatherland by not only having babies, but to devote their lives to the state. They encouraged their children to join the Hitler Jugend and the Deutsche, Bund der Deutsche models to create a future generation willing to serve the state. Um, Families were rewarded with vacations and money for serving Germany and having babies. Women had iron crosses made for them for having 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 babies for the fatherland. And as their sons turned 18, mothers bravely sent them off to war, stating, I have given a soldier for the Fuhrer. So when we look at fertility, it is an important part of this aspect of the story. Also, in a very bizarre, crass method of controlled breeding, the best and most beautiful of Germany's Aryan women were chosen for the Lebensborn program, where they were housed in villas and SS officers came and impregnated them to create a new race of Hitler's children. Um, so we have that aspect for women that they had to deal with. But also for most women, now, Clara's example is a little bit out of the norm because Cologne was bombed very much during the war, but the vast majority of Germany was not bombed until 1943, which we also see in her book. But most German women, especially those whose husbands were members of the Nazi Party, were protected from the strains of war because they were ransacking the occupied countries. Foodstuffs kept coming in, materials poured into Nazi Germany, mostly to feed the soldiers, but also they were not as deprived as women in other countries. They had forced enslaved labor that provided the manpower for total war. This kept the women out of the factories. Also, Hitler did not like the idea of his women working in the factories in the fields. But once they lost at Stalingrad and the start of aerial bombardment by the Allies in 1943, for the first time, British and Americans could reach the heart of Germany. Women faced the reality of war. Unmarried women were called into the factories. They were used as support personnel. They served as Red Cross nurses. And in a really odd twist of fate, women who were nurses and and their families were members of the Nazi Party, they were tried as war criminals after the war for their part in the liquidation of disabled children and patients in the hospital. As the war went badly, women's daily lives were upended by food shortages and rationing. Also, the constant bombing raids, which we read about in Claire's book, they just left the cities in ruins. And you have to think about in those 2 years, by 1945, over 85% of the housing was completely destroyed in Germany. The infrastructure was destroyed. There was no running water, no sanitation, no food, no housing, no electricity, no heat, no medical care, no transportation. And it was up to the women who were dubbed Trümmerfrauen, rebel women, who had to rebuild the country. The Allies made them go to work. And also now they were the occupied and not the occupiers. And this defeat handed German women crippling blows, especially for those in the eastern half of the country. The Russians, seeking revenge, raped, pillaged, and ransacked their way through eastern Germany. Stalin had told his battle worn soldiers, "You've been on a 1,000-mile march. Have a German woman. Defile the master race." No woman was safe from a Russian soldier. From the youngest girl to the elderliest of women, Russian brutality raped a large percentage of the female population. Historians estimate somewhere between 2 and 2.5 million German women suffered the humiliation and degradation of repeated rape and sexual assault by the Soviets. Also, one of the harshest blows to German women, which did not gain them a lot of sympathy, was the loss of their men. I mean, we blame the Germans for the war. But remember, these women had to mourn their husbands and their sons and their brothers who were not there. They died in far off countries. They were missing in action. They were in POW camps, or they were declared war criminals and running for their lives. So when you think about over 5 million men were dead, another 1.2 million missing, hundreds of thousands in POW camps. This was hard for women because they were not allowed to mourn their dead. War memorials to the soldiers of Nazi Germany were banned by the Allies. And so these women had to grieve. And this is so humiliating, especially after the defeat of their homeland, that they couldn't even create a memorial for their loved ones. Now, for women who lived in the UK, England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. Remember, Ireland is an independent country, and they were like, we're not siding with England, we're neutral. But the UK joined the war effort with a true British stiff upper lip mentality. Free from occupation except for the Channel Islands, they were the last holdout in Europe. And Great Britain, girded by Churchill's words, were determined to, I wish I could imitate Churchill, but I can't. We shall not flag or fail. We shall fight to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. Women embraced this war effort to prove that they could have their finest hour also. Knowing that an invasion was imminent, the government issued gas masks to every man, woman, and child, and even horses. Women cobbled Anderson shelters in their backyard to protect from air raids. Cellars were stocked with food supplies. The underground became a refuge for those in the cities. In an additional attempt to prepare the Brits to fight, over 1 million children and young mothers were evacuated from the cities, seaside villages, and the Channel Islands to be sequestered in the countryside, far from the rain of bullets and bombs and missiles and gas attacks. And so this movement freed women from the day-to-day care of children and allowed them to join the war effort with abandon. They were to build the guns to save their sons or free a man to fight. This allowed married and unmarried women to do this. Unlike German women who rarely joined the war effort, British women flowed into the factories and war jobs. The government required all unmarried women under 30 to join the armed forces or the land army, including the future Queen Elizabeth, who served as a mechanic. By 1943, 90% of single women and 80% of married women were serving their country. They manned anti-aircraft batteries, they served as civil defense workers, they worked in munitions factories, they drove jeeps, ambulances, and fire trucks. They were nurses, and being nurses was very dangerous. These women were on the front lines. Over 400 British nurses were killed during World War II, and many of them were in Japanese concentration camps. To protect their precious food supply, women dug up the lawns and parks in England to plant victory gardens. Women joined the land army to work on farms and kept them running when the men left to fight. All out sacrifice was the call. Even though England was not occupied except for the Channel Islands, the German onslaught was relentless. The Blitz, constant aerial bombing, V-1 and V-2 rocket barrages, the ships carrying their precious cargo were sunk. Over 400,000 soldiers were killed, and 80,000 sailors and merchant marines were sent to their watery graves. So women really had to sacrifice here and know that they were going to lose their men. Women were also recruited as code breakers. So, in a really neat turn of events, they were given really important jobs. Those who served at Bletchley House and at places hidden all across the island, they joined the SOE, the resistance, and because the British realized that women made great spies and they served a very real part of the resistance on the continent, they were dropped into enemy territory. They blew up rail lines. They trained resistance fighters in hand-to-hand combat and how to shoot. They smuggled weapons, and they were key in the D-Day invasion and the success of it. And so the women in the UK fought in this war in a very important way. And many of them, though, talked about the emotional scarring after the war, what later we would call PTSD, and their losses that they had to endure on their own. And so while we see after the war women trying to create a semblance of normal life, their wartime experiences permanently scarred them, yet also enriched them. It changed them forever because women came out of that war with a real sense of their inner strength and their self, and that they could do it on their own. I'm done. There we go.
Nicely clear.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, good morning. We can hear you.
Right, am I ready to go?
You're good to go.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'd like to just say before we start a little bit about the people in the extracts that I'm going to read, who they were. And so the principal characters were Lotte, my mother, who for whom the diary was written. Walter and Ruby were Clara's sons. The Reinemans were friends and neighbours of Klara. Bully, their daughter, was my mother's best friend. And Elfrida, the Reinemans' maid, all play a part in this. Klara was separated from her husband, Robert. He lived in the centre of Cologne in his studio, and she lived in the family home. I've tried to show in these extracts the very personal account of her life during this period, and reflecting the experiences of a housewife desperate to find food for a family, of a citizen enduring the privations of the war without compromising her principles, but above all, of a woman whose desire for the safe return of her children was paramount, all within the context of the horrors of the war. So this is the first entry in the diary, the 10th of December, 1940. And now I am completely alone, for today they have taken Walter away as well, in spite of the fact that over and over again they reassured him, "You are the 2nd Reserve Unit, you will not be needed." But after 6 months' war and a reorganization, Walter's unit became 1st Reserve. That was supposed to be a long way off from call up as well. Nevertheless, I feared the day would come. The boys answered my unspoken fears. "No, mother, it will be ages before we are called up," says Ruby. "So don't worry." And so they both continued with their studies, Walter at the university and Ruby at the Academy of Art. Soon the holidays came, and already we had had a year of war. It was almost a year since you and I had said goodbye to one another, a time so bitter and hard for me to bear. Duties filled up most of my time, and gradually the small and large restrictions to our lives increased. And now one can only get things with coupons, even clothing coupons. There are substitutes for everything, even toilet soap. There is no coffee and little butter. Fat and meat are becoming scarcer. We had not stored potatoes as we'd been assured there would be plenty. And then came a severe frost.
Claire sitzt in ihrem Wohnzimmer und spricht hier quasi in der.
For all the potatoes that had not gone rotten went to the military. What could one do? Very little, really. And potatoes are so important to be able to feel full. So I had to think about how I would get some. There was nothing in the city. So what could I do? Well, not for nothing had I spent years walking in the countryside and I had made friends there. They would help me. And so I often went from door to beg them to sell me what they could spare. Sometimes I failed, but often I succeeded. Usually I paid with money, but sometimes I had to trade. And so I searched through my things and took the farmers' gifts. And then I got eggs, potatoes, fruit, and sometimes poultry. 1 week after another, I walked into the Bergische Land to lonely farms, getting what I could, and slowly the winter passed. I often got enough to give to others who were suffering. Mostly I helped the Reinemans. Bully often went with me, and we carried the potatoes in our rucksacks. In the spring, there were more eggs, and so I bought all I could. I preserved any left over. Then it was harvest time, and I picked blueberries and bottled them for the winter. I was able to help my friends with the blueberries, and soon it was autumn. One day followed another, and no news from you. Autumn was passing, and it was time to prepare for winter. And then came what I had feared most. Ruby was called up. He got orders to be ready on October the 5th. That was almost unbearable for me. Then came another blow, Walter's call-up papers. In spite of everything, like many mothers who had clung on to their sons, I had no choice. And so on the 10th of December, Walter had to go as well. And so I've begun to write all this down on the day that Walter was taken away, in the hope that one day we can relate it all to one another together. 14th of December, 1940. A couple of things I must tell you about from before the boys went. We had one air raid after another, and praise God we had withstood them. All the time I thought of you. How often have I tried to get news of you? I have written to the Red Cross, and every time the reply from the Foreign Department is the same. No news. I'd given up and left it in God's hands because I thought it might be making things difficult for you. When one day in October, after my beloved Ruby's call-up, and I was feeling so lonely and abandoned, what lay in the letterbox? A letter. Good God, from Lotta. I went hot and cold. I opened the letter and read it over and over. How I thank God for news of you at last. There was so much news in your letter. Above all, that you have become a mother. and to think that I couldn't be with you, and you will have had your baby all alone with no one who could speak your language. 27th of March 1941. The day before yesterday, I got a summons from the Gestapo, and this morning I went. A young man from the SS asked me if I had dealings with enemy countries. I was astonished at first and I denied it. And then he became coarse and crude, but I protested my innocence. As things became clearer, I realized it was a letter from you which had made me a suspect. I wanted to have that letter, and there followed quite an argument, but in the end it was all right, and I departed with my letter. Naturally, I was forbidden to tell anyone what had happened. We've gone so far here that we can't even get the most harmless news from our loved ones without suspicion. 22nd of June 1941. Now, our so-called politicians have earned something for themselves, a Russian declaration of war. Even this week, they were saying that we will have the Ukraine for 99 years and Stalin was expected to visit Berlin. I laughed at all this rubbish, and they all pointed the finger when I said I would never believe in a Russian friendship, and that a Russian-English alliance was much more likely than one with us. And so it is. I believe an American-English alliance is much more likely than anything else. One of these days, we will experience an invasion such as Hitler, with his tiny brain, can't ever have imagined. Those mad big shots and their henchmen have led the German people by the nose, and the poor people have to pay the price for what these adventurers have set in motion. Christmas Eve, 1941. Ruby's here once again, and we three, Ruby, Walter and I, sat around the Christmas tree with our thoughts. We spoke about you a lot, and we all consoled ourselves with the thought that this must end sometime. And now I go in spirit to you and your family to celebrate Christmas. Your child is now more than a year old and will be fascinated by the tree. How time passes. I can see you very small, looking at the Christmas tree in wonder, then Walter, and then my good Ruby, and I remember how touched I was by all your Christmas decorations. 1st of March 1942. The winter has been the hardest and longest for 150 years. It is terribly cold, we have no heating. The misery is awful. Outside one sees little children without decent shoes. We eat less and less, and Walter and I have 2 small meals a day to make the food last longer. Even so, if I did not have friends in the country, we would have even less. 10th of March. I'm very worried about Ruby. My poor boy volunteered to go to Africa to avoid going to Russia again. Now he is in Landau in Pfalz, getting ready to go. Today I tried to get some shoes, but there's no peace, there's no food, and there are no shoes. 2nd of April 42. The farmers have been forbidden, indeed under threat of death, to let the starving city dwellers have anything. So I have to go in great danger into the Bergische Land to get anything. I go on the loneliest woodland paths to avoid being caught. The penalty is the chop. So we are sitting here and Easter nearly upon us with nothing. The bitterness increases, but no one dares to grumble. 12th of May 1942. The English have not been for 3 weeks, and the stupid people believe that Hitler has frightened them off. Well, just you wait. They'll soon be back showing us just how frightened they are. Churchill spoke on Sunday, and what he said was right. We just need to build up our courage and cast off the yoke. Then we could clean out the evil and start again. It would mean starting from nothing, but we would be free. 5th of June 1942. One of the Nazi big shots, Heydrich, has been blown up in Prague. I hope the rest of them soon go the same way. 26th of October 42. Yesterday I went to the cathedral as the Archbishop was giving his first pontifical address. The Archbishop is our former parish priest. You will remember him, Dr. Frings. When I got to the cathedral, what a sight. The cathedral square as far as the Reichsstraße was solid with people. The Nazis will not have liked it at all, but our Archbishop, as he arrived in his carriage, the crowd spontaneously began to shout, "Heil our Archbishop." 8th of November 1942. They've been saying here for a long time that soon they are going to attack the island, as in England. And when they do, they will destroy everything within 8 days. People express their pity for me, that I have a daughter living there, but I have to laugh silently about it and think, you poor fools. Or sometimes I lose patience with them and give them a piece of my mind. I often wonder why it is that I'm not sitting in a concentration camp. Christmas 1942. Yes, Christmas. Saddest of all festivals for me. This time I was all alone. On Christmas Eve, I went to your father's, because this evening of all evenings would be equally difficult for us both. As I arrived, he said to me, "Do you already know?" "No, what is it then?" He gave me a card that he had sent to Ruby. It had been returned stamped, "Receiver missing." I had to sit down before my knees gave way. What I had so long feared had become true. Maybe in the near future we will hear even worse news. To think that my dear boy, my favourite, may not be alive anymore. Dear God in heaven, do not let this be true. I immediately wrote letters to everywhere I could think of for information. Up to now, I've had no news. I've been everywhere to get information. Robert König, the OKW officer, says he's probably a prisoner of the English. In the meantime, I wait and endure the uncertainty and imagine the most dreadful things and have no peace. How happy I would be if he were a prisoner of the English, and then I would have the hope of seeing him again, of having him with me again, and I would thank God on my knees. I would endure anything this unhappy war could visit upon me. 9th of January 1943. I'd already written to the OKW and the Red Cross and been told nothing. Then today I got this news. Your son, Private Robert Seuffert, is an English prisoner of war. A stone fell from my heart. He's alive. He's out of the hell. I am so happy. I thank God and his and my Creator. I have the chance of seeing him again, even if it takes time. I long for the day when I hear from him personally, if he's healthy and how he's doing. 10th of February 1943. I don't hear any more from Ruby. They have told me he will be taken from Egypt to Canada, and now I'm terrified something might happen to him on the way there. And now Walter is in danger, and I worry very much about him. Your father is, and will remain the same, egotist through and through. 26th of April, Easter Tuesday. I went to try to find a room in the country because I want to rest a bit there and have something for the boys. I got a room in an old castle Ereshofen from a Baron G, but it was not as easy as it sounds. Maybe one day I will be able to tell you all about it. I'm completely alone in my house and I can't sleep there at night anyway. So I went to my room at Ereshofen. It rained heavily on the first day, but I went into the woods and spent hours walking there. I felt very lonely and wondered what would become of me. And so it goes on. The waiting, the worrying, the suffering, and the war. 13th of May, 1943. Herr Rommel received for his duties in Africa the highest order that a swine can give, a decoration with diamonds. Yes, with diamonds, the big shots have similarly rewarded themselves, so that if it all goes wrong, they can find somewhere in the world where they can forget their crimes in peace. But the only worry they have is that they might not get there. 3rd of October, 1943. Dr. Goebbels, that swine, has said, today we have decided that we will go on fighting until we win. Well, of course, The big shots have got so much to lose. Their wealth, their heads, everything. God, when will that be? How long will that be? Nobody thinks it can go on, but this monster, this rotten apple in our midst, this misbegotten creature, lets the people go on and on suffering. Our soldiers bleed and die in increasing numbers in Russia and in Italy, and this band of criminals holds the people in its grip. Day and night, the aeroplanes come over. Last night, 1,000 came, and that beast speaks of holding out. 3rd of March, 44. Walter has gone again. Whilst Walter was home, Frau Janssens brought her husband to Schloss Eresholm to see us. He'd been discharged because of a leg injury. It was good to see them, but what on earth was I going to give them to eat? But our soldiers know how to look after themselves. They're used to it. There is a moat around the castle full of fish. Our 2 heroes saw this, and already their mouths were watering. They wanted fish. I tried to dissuade them, but soon they disappeared. An hour later, Walter surfaced in my room. Well, I said, have you caught any fish for our evening meal? We have got fish, mother, but we need something to carry it in, so no one knows what we have done. It's a carp of at least 10 pounds in weight. We caught it with a pitchfork. I was terrified. Imagine if anyone had seen them. Oh, God. Anyway, I had to agree to help them, and soon they were there with their booty. It was a wonderful carp. Not 10, but 18 pounds in weight. Fortunately, we were alone that afternoon, and soon we began preparing and cooking the fish. For butter, we used the butter that we had got for the whole of next week. We decorated the table nicely, and we set to eat the giant fish, which was at least 10 pounds in weight, ready for the table. Unfortunately, I couldn't eat a lot. I was nearly full from cooking it. But our 2 fish robbers ate until they couldn't move, and everything had gone. I think it was the first time they'd been full since the war began. Walter couldn't sleep for overeating. And so the story had a happy ending. Our heroes had stolen with care and consideration. 18th of October, 1944. In the evening, I spoke to an officer who came from Cologne. Herr Offizier, were you on duty? Yes. What does Braunsfeld look like? Appalling. It's not there anymore. The Aachener Strasse has gone as well. Everything, the whole of Braunsfeld is a bomb crater. Can I go with you tomorrow? Yes. Be ready 3 in the morning. I was ready on time and off I went to Cologne. Would my house still be standing? Would the Reinemans be alive? I went across the bomb craters to Voigtstrasse. Not a house was standing. I went slowly towards Wieshauserstrasse. The Krauthäuser's house was a pile of rubble, and then I got a view of my house, a smoking ruin. I went up to the house. In the garden was a burnt-out incendiary canister, and everywhere the sound of fuses going off. Everywhere death. 15th of November, 1944. Today I received a letter from Frau Reinemann. It was very disturbing. I had to get to Cologne as soon as I could, and with great difficulty I got to Braunsfeld. I knocked on the door, and when they heard my voice, the door was happily opened to me. Frau Reinemann fell weeping around my neck, followed by Elfriede, the faithful soul. Then they told me their sorry tale. Bulli and Herr Reinemann had been arrested by the Gestapo. On Sunday morning, they were sleeping in late. Herr Reinemann had gone to Odenthal for a few days to have a rest. Elfriede had gone home to her mother. So the 2, mother and daughter, were alone and in bed when there was a knock on the door. Who is it? The Gestapo. Open the door. So they opened the door. Is your husband here? No. Have you got weapons? No. Where is your husband? In Odenthal. But why are you here? To arrest you and your husband. Get dressed. Bulli leapt out of bed. Arrest me, but not my mother. The door opened and another official came in. And whilst the door was open, they could see that the people in the house opposite had been arrested and were being taken away. there had been French people who, in the most terrible time, had stayed at the house opposite and slept there. Later, the owner of the house had, out of sympathy, taken in another person whom she believed to be a compatriot of these people, but who in fact was an informer for the Gestapo, and he had betrayed them. They were arrested and taken away, as well as another family on the street, and Bully, who was taken in her mother's place. They've been gone now for 4 weeks for questioning. Herr Reinemann was arrested on the Tuesday after he returned from Odenthal. He was accused of having given the Frenchman a revolver. He couldn't deny it because it was true, but not for the reasons they were implying. Night after night, robbers and looters came to do their dirty work and no one was safe. As Herr Reinemann was away a lot, he gave the gun to the youngest Frenchman so that he could take care of the street. That was all. And for that, they're now sitting in prison. I comforted her as much as I could, but what use are words? Bully had not done anything, yet she must have done something. They had wanted to arrest the mother. That was Bully's greatest terror. Could it be that her mother had done something? I don't know. Anyway, they've been under arrest for nearly 5 weeks now, and still there is no solution. In the morning, they get 2 pieces of dry bread, same in the evening, and at midday they get a watery soup. They have to work during the day, and at night they freeze and have no protection from the air raids. God knows what's going to happen. Frau Reinemann, with Elfrieda's help, has got a good lawyer. It is only with the greatest good fortune that they managed to find someone to take on the case and who has the courage to fight the Gestapo. The poor, poor people. And that was the last entry in her diary. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. All right, Mel, we're coming over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Claire. That was wonderful reading. Here at the International English Library in Düsseldorf, we've had the privilege of hosting Claire reading various excerpts from her grandmother's diaries a few times. So I'm in a unique position to be able to ask a couple of questions to Claire. Well, the first one that I would like to ask Claire is, your grandmother clearly had a remarkable ability while living in an era of such extreme censorship, from the earliest part of the diary, to see through the dominant propaganda and have such an acute and clear understanding of the realities of the situation, which for us is clear in hindsight, and with the war being ended, it became apparent to everybody, but she managed to see it in real time. She could foresee the futility of the Russian front before it even happened. She saw the political agenda and callously marking the Jewish population, to just name a few examples that are evident in the diaries. How do you think she was able to see this so clearly, Claire, and to be so brave and courageous to write about it, especially after she had come to the attention of the Gestapo?
Yes, yes. Well, of course, I didn't see her in this light until I translated, so I was no better off really than anybody else. But I can only say personally, I thought she was lovely and I loved being with her. And one thing I do remember her saying to me was, when I was perhaps a teenager, she said, if you want to do something and people don't want you to do it, that is your parents, if you really want to do that, do it. And so I think, yes, she was determined. And at one point she talks about there being some appalling raid, and she said, but I will not give in. So I think she was determined to just carry on as best she could. And her deep faith, of course, was another thing, I think, that persuaded her that all things being equal, if God wanted it, it would all be okay in the end.
Which is leads on nicely to my next question to you. As her diaries progress, it's clear that Klara, your grandmother, fundamentally knows that the war is not going to be resolved, that the Nazis are not going to stand down without tremendously never-ending, escalating human cost. She often asks, where will it end? Yet throughout the diaries, her strength and her moral conviction is evident. It comes through many times throughout her entries. But she keeps looking forward to it eventually being over. So can you elaborate a little bit more about your grandmother's strength and resilience and what you think? I mean, I think you probably already answered this, but what kept her going through those challenging years?
I think one thing, she did love the countryside. And I think she was totally at home in the countryside. I mean, it staggers me that if they get the death penalty for going to get to the farms, it didn't stop her going. And there is that stubbornness or determination. I think that's really, and she wanted to have the means to have things ready for her children. Not in the parts I've read, but there's a place where she needs to get a suit for Walter. What she'd already got, because the father was very mean, he was not a very nice man. She needed to get a suit for Walter for some reason. And the only one she had was for Ruby, who was considerably shorter and bigger, fatter. And so she had to find a tailor to alter this for Walter. And so she eventually, but she's trailing around all over the place, finding a tailor who will do the job. And then finally she finds one, but she's told she's got to unpick it all. Then he can put it back together for her. So again, you know, Walter was going to have a suit. And that was that.
So she was just relentless in her drive to get things that she thought needed to be done.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, this is possibly a bit of a hugely unfair question I'm about to ask you. Well, it's not going to really be a question, but I'll make a statement and perhaps you can talk to it. Before we open up to wider questions. Bringing your grandmother's deeply personal diaries into the 21st century is such a remarkable gift in terms that it offers a unique and remarkable insight into the daily struggles and fears of an ordinary German or the ordinary Germans connected to her during those war years. However, many of the themes that come out in the diaries feel to me at least very extremely relevant to today's zeitgeist. Obviously, Klara could never have imagined that her diaries would be reaching a wide audience now here in the 21st century. I mean, they were initially intended just for your mother. But given that now we're living in such an age again where war is on our doorstep, especially here in Europe, and what we've seen happen in the last year in the Middle East. There are lots of themes that feel pertinently relevant, I think, also in America at the moment, with increasing book bannings and censorship and the war of ideas. Can you speak just a little bit to that, Claire?
Well, one thing I've thought about is, for a start, I don't think in the West there is the deep faith to anything like the extent that she had it. So that is very different. I've often thought that the war for her was from within. The evil was within. It wasn't coming from the outside like it is in Ukraine today. I won't say it was clearly didn't enjoy the bombing, but I don't think she ever I think she felt it had to be in order to kill off the Nazi regime. She was very accepting of that, apart from one or two places where she does things. She actually says in English, do you call that fair play? So presumably up to that point, she accepted it. I don't know whether we would do that today. The other thing, I was thinking about accepting things, the will of God. And I'm wondering, in Gaza today, are Muslims accepting it as the will of God? I don't know. But I don't think that what we're seeing today is very much like what she was dealing with and how she was dealing with it. That's the best I can do, Melanie, on the topic.
It is a big ask. It is indeed. Michelle, do you have any other thoughts, or could you answer that? I mean, it's a hugely broad, philosophical, horrible question just to throw at you. I think we might not be able
There
to
you go.
hear.
I was muted. I'm sorry. Having taught Hitler, Nazi Germany, and modern Europe and World War II for over 25 years, it is really interesting to see the rise of neo-Nazi parties in Europe. It's really sad in a way, especially in Poland, there's laws forbidding you to talk against the Poles and how they handled the Holocaust. France has never come to terms with its Vichy regime. I mean, they just now were allowed to read Mein Kampf in Germany. And I think it's really sad to see that we have these neo-Nazi parties rising up and gaining tremendous momentum in France and Germany and in Hungary and all these places. And I think the migrant crisis, always the other. In history, we always talk about the other. And so in Nazi Germany, you had the other, the Jews, the communists. And that's one thing we often forget about Hitler is he was just as hated against the communists as he was the Jews. And so when you blame it on others, it allows you to rise to power. And I think we have a legacy here of young Europeans who are not of the World War II generation and don't really understand or respect what happened. And so I think they see the other, whatever that other is in their country, as scary and embrace these policies. And I think we need to really go back and allow them to examine their history, and especially for Germany, where they were very much restricted to what they could learn in schools and things like that. I think it's important that they be exposed to the full realm. And I know in Germany, they just started making movies about World War II. One is Our Grandparents' War, which is on Netflix, which is amazing, and Downfall, which is amazing. But to even be able to read books, but we also have to deal with the issue of complicity. And that's one thing that we don't see these countries accepting responsibility for, including the Soviet Union. We forget the dismemberment of Poland. For 2 years, Soviet Union were allies with Nazi Germany, and that didn't happen. They didn't happen. So I think that we need to really work on the history to help stop some of these movements that are crossing Europe.
Yeah.
And in the United States, students don't know. A lot of them don't even know what the Holocaust is. So I'm not just
Or
blaming
see
Europe.
the same propaganda role plays that are being used to gain power are rolling out. It's the same gameplay.
Right. And
Yeah.
so people love the strong man. People throughout history have loved the strong man. And so we saw the danger of that in World War II, of having these strong men, but yet in times of economic or social unrest, they're very appealing to people.
Mm.
And they're charismatic. They capture audiences. So it's
Offer solutions.
yeah, I mean, so they say the right words that people want to hear, and whether we're talking about in the United States with Trump or with Marine Le Pen in France or any of these, they are resonating with their people because they're saying, look at what they're doing to our country, whether it's immigrants or unemployment or high costs or whatever. I can fix it, and people don't look beyond what is coming.
Fix it, but at what price?
Yeah. I mean, one of the worst strongmen right now is Putin, and Russians love him. I don't understand. They love him, but he gave them back a Russia that they're proud of. So
We're being joined again, I believe, by Annika.
Yes, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. And for those of us who are here in person, I wanted to remind you that there will be a reception afterwards for a little meet and greet with Michelle if you are interested. Thank you again for coming, and I hope everyone has a lovely rest of their day, no matter what time zone they're in.
Thank you, Annika.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. That was wonderful. Great job.
So should we hang around, Colby?
Yes, please. If you guys
Yeah?
wouldn't mind, sticking around for maybe just another 30 minutes, and then that way, if there's any sort of lingering questions that we have during the reception portion, we'll have you guys available. I think they've got a computer in that space already set up for you. So I'm gonna hop off of my computer here.
Okie dokie. And I gather Jorgen is still there. There are still some people online.
I do show that he's still participating. Yes.
Yeah. So we'll wait till.
Yeah, we'll keep the Zoom going, and we
see
can keep the
Colby
discussion
and
happening here.
It's the chicken stable crowd, Claire.
Oh, I can't see anybody I recognise, can I? Oh, yes, yes, yes.
You know,
Hello.
that's what a star is about. They recognize you, even if you don't recognize them.
I think it's a moment on stage when the spotlights are so bright that you can't see anything out in the audience.
That's true, that's true. I mean, it's lovely to see you all.
Yes, good to see you, and compliments from here. It was really a good job you did. Great.
Yes.
Good shows and good reading and all that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Claire, where are you?
I'm here.
I know, but are you in Oklahoma or Germany or where are you?
Oh, I'm in England. Sorry, I'm in England.
Oh, okay. I just,
Oh, so you're Mary?
yeah, I'm in Oklahoma. I just
Right.
wasn't, at the beginning, it was a little bit confusing where everybody was.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting.
Did you enjoy it? Yes,
Yeah,
good.
I did a lot.
I think I'm supposed to be just waiting here, aren't I? For the minute. For the minute.
So this was your grandmother's diary, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And she wrote it for my mother, so that and that I mean, there's so much more. This is really quite a small segment from it, really. But she wanted it for my mother, and then and she hopes that even if Klara, my grandmother, you know, even if she would survive the war, there would be this document. And then eventually my mother got these, but I don't think she ever actually read them. And I got them eventually after my father and mother had died. And so I translated it into English to start with. And then subsequently got together with Jürgen, who you will have seen, and we're producing a book it's going to be in German and in English.
Oh, nice.
So sorry.
Do you know when it will be published?
Well, we're aiming for September, but we're not exactly sure quite how we're going to do it, how we're going to deal with the distribution of it and so on. So but we have a lady in Germany who's very familiar with doing the German side. So we're sort of having to work out how best to do the English version, whether I have it published here. It's going to happen, but I'm not exactly sure how or when.
So I have one other question then. So what happened after the last entry? Can you just quickly summarize?
Yes. Well, I mean, she did survive, and she and so did all of them, actually, all the people, all the characters in that. There are one or two
sons and her husband.
Yes, and then my uncle, who was in the prisoner of war in Canada, when they started to repatriate them, they came over, and they were quite coincidentally, he was stationed a couple of miles from where my mother lived. So he was really very, very lucky. And then eventually he got back to Germany. And they, of course, the housing had all gone in Cologne. And people lived on these farms in various places. And so one of the farms where my grandmother had been to get food, etc., she ended up there, and she was there for the rest of her life. My uncle Ruby, the artist, he went back to Cologne in the end, and then my uncle Walter, who was one of these people, an eternal student, I suppose you'd say he was. But you know, they and she was 83 when she died, my grandmother. She did have quite a nice long time, and my grandfather died in 1946, and I think probably that was a big relief to everybody. I don't think he was a nice man. He was a wonderful artist, very, very clever, but in terms of his family, not a good man. But I don't know whether you've seen Jürgen at all. Have you on the picture on the screen in Germany? I don't know whether. Anyway, it was
the little room with all the people sitting. Oh right, okay, yeah, I can see him now. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Claire, what year was Klara born?
Sorry?
This is Janine in Düsseldorf. What year was
Well, she was born, I had to write this down because I can't, 1889.
1889. Okay, interesting.
And then she died in 1972, I think.
Okay. It's not a timeline.
Sorry?
I said it's nice to have a timeline of
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely.
I've seen particular works of your grandfather, and it's just amazing. Which museums is some of his work in Cologne?
There's the City Museum, and then there's the Rhineland Museum, the paintings there. And then, but a lot of his work there is stuff in the United States as well.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
He did, I can't tell you offhand, but he did a lot of religious works and Stations of the Cross. And I can't just tell you exactly now, but certainly one lot did go to the United States. And then he did a lot of murals. And so between the wars, he painted the ceiling of the opera house in Berlin, and some, but of course everything was destroyed in the war. So all of those, and many churches around, and the Nassau Bank was another place where he painted murals, and he was obviously very, very gifted, and a wonderful portrait painter as well, actually. But so I've got some of the things are in the museums in Cologne, and pretty well all the others I have got. I'm the only one left really now from all of them.
How wonderful that you have those, though. You have your own little museum.
Yes. Well, I have a gigantic painting of Klara, and my husband said, God, where are we going to put that then? And well, I'll find a way. And we have.
That's a lovely problem to have, though.
Yes. So, yes.
So tell me again, your grandfather, the artist, his name again?
Robert. And then Seuffert, Seuff, F for Freddie, ERT.
Seuffert. Okay.
Yeah. But you have to be careful when you look, because there's also his son, of course, is also Robert. But if you look online, you'll see more of the old man's paintings.
Okay.
Got information about him anyway.
Okay. Yes, it makes me want to do a little research on my own.
Yes.
Talented, but not the best husband and not the best father.
No, yeah. Well, yeah, I suppose you're very gifted. He was very gifted, and all his energy went into the arts, not into his family.
Right. Yeah. Well, that happens.
Yeah.
It's probably a little bit off topic, but it's amazing in recent times how many of the great artists turned out to be, some of them not most great human beings.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Clash
absolutely.
against people like Picasso at the moment,
Oh,
or
yeah,
even
yeah.
the writers, some of the
Yeah.
writers that seem to exploit the women around them.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, any more details on the publication of the book of the diary?
Well, it's sort of I am now proofreading the very final proofreading of the German version, and then what I'm not sure what I've been sort of concentrating on this, and then also on the proofreading. But we're due to have a meeting, Jürgen and Anya, who is his publisher or our publisher.
Actually,
And-
Anya is here. She's online now too, and she's
Oh
with
right,
us.
good.
And
Oh, well,
so we can talk about that later on. Actually, the German version is just about finished. We are doing the proofreading, and it could appear anytime. And Anya has done a wonderful job, including most of the paintings and the photographs that we've seen in the presentation here today. They'll be in. Plus, of course, there will be an introduction, and because Michelle, you asked earlier on, yes, there will be a sequel too, explaining what happened to the people after the war. Plus, what I really cherish a lot is Claire's memories of how she first got to the farm here and visited her grandmother for the first time in 1948, where she also describes how she found in Cologne people placing flowers at heaps of rubble where they thought their loved ones might have died. So that were the impressions of 8-year-old Claire when she first came.
and I've never forgotten it.
Pardon me, Claire?
Sorry, go on. I've never forgotten it.
Yes, and that German version is going to appear definitely in September. And as Claire said, the English version also, it will be ready by then. We have not really decided yet on the logistics of how to make it possible that it can be then bought internationally. But what also might be interesting is that Claire, just a year ago, produced the audiobook of the English version. So that's ready too. And it's just in the final stages of being edited. And the German version will be read soon by Nicola, who's also here. And so that'll also be available from September. Yes.
Wonderful. We will look forward to that.
But it's all very exciting.
It is, but I really thoroughly enjoyed your reading today, Claire.
Good. It was a bit chaotic, you know. I have got written proof that it was 9:15 Oklahoma time to check in, and the thing would start at 10. And so, but that was, and we're 6 hours ahead. So that was why I was all ready to come at 9:15.
I was there an hour early as well. I was texting Jürgen going, I'm in the waiting room. Have you got in? And he said,
well, you did your research on Oklahoma time about 2 or 3 weeks ago. But meanwhile, they switched to summer saving time. And
right.
so you were 1 hour off, yes.
Right, yes. Yeah, well, it's a good job you phoned, because I was pretty well ready, but I would have got myself a glass of water, which I've now got. So.
Well, it's a good job you picked up the phone. I thought you were already concentrating on your...
Yeah, no, I was upstairs and my phone was downstairs. But Hugh heard it, thankfully. Good. So, all good. So are we done, do you think? Are we finished?
I think so. I think we'll just wait for Colby to come back and give us the we're free to go.
Yeah, okay.
I'm very appreciative. I think there's a few people here who joined via link. Obviously, I see a few names on the screen because I was able to get it gallery style, who I think may be connected with you, Claire. But I think we might have still some guests that are getting this extra bonus experience.
Connected to you, Claire, is slightly off point. They are closely connected to you. I can see Alison and Philippa, and maybe they want to join and tell us something about.
Are they there? Are they there? Can you see them?
Yes.
How can I do that then? Go to gallery.
If you go to gallery and switch it to gallery view.
Oh yes, I can see Alison. I can see Philly. Oh, hello. A slight cock up with the time.
So they're actually relatives. You're on mute, Philippa.
That's Philippa. Where's Alison gone? She was there somewhere, wasn't she?
So we're Clare's daughters.
Oh, hi. Lovely.
Sorry, yes.
So you're inheriting all this family legacy.
Yeah.
And Philippa, now that you're on, what would you say is determination one of the things that you inherited?
Well, not quite as much as my mother, but yes. Resilience, determination, and a bit of a show off.
Oh,
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing at all.
What about you, Ali? Ali, what did you inherit? Determination.
What did I inherit? I guess I inherited determination, resilience, but also so I learned German. I lived in Germany for a little bit, which I loved, and I did art, not very well, but I did a bit of art, so I studied that for a bit as well. So I guess I got that side of it.
And that's Melanie, of course, who you've heard me mention. And Jürgen, you both know.
Well, and don't forget, there are quite a few people still listening to us. It feels like we are just private here, but actually we are on stage. And I just remembered the proofreading today, a passage where Klara was hoping that Claire would inherit some of the artist traits of the family. And I must say, ever since I started reading what Claire writes, I'm quite sure she did. But then maybe it was more writing than the other arts. But certainly there is this gift of the family. Claire,
to be able to create art that can have a lasting legacy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking gift of the gab is an expression, a gift of the gab. Didn't talk. I think we can all talk for England, the three of us.
Hi, Claire. It's Megan. We got a couple questions for you.
Right.
How old was Klara when she was writing the diary?
She was in her 50s.
50s. And then how did you become in possession of the diary? Did you find it or was it passed down to you?
I knew it existed. I knew it was there, but it was just one of those things that was there. But it was after my parents had both died and I was clearing out and sorting stuff. And it was the right time for me then to really look at it. And I had at work, I had a computer at work, so I could work on it in my lunch break at work. So it arose really out of that. But I knew it existed for a very long time.
Great. Those are only questions. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And then you guys can stay and chat for a little bit if you want. It's still being recorded, but we can also just give the call to be complete if that's what you wish.
There's nothing else we needed to do today from your
No.
end?
So Jürgen, I think the only thing we need from you is the number of people that are with you on the Zoom call that are in your at your watch party. So that way we can get a estimated attendance. And then Claire, we had a librarian who created a take-home booklet about Cologne and some of that. And we would really like to send it to you. So if you could email us your address, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, that would be lovely. Thank you very much. Yes, I'll do that straight away. Yes, thank you.
Of course. And thank you all so much again. It's just been a real treat. We appreciate all of your time and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Right.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.